Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. It's a little late, but this will be my May wrap up, or all of the books that I read in the month of May. Let's just jump right into it. The first thing I mention is that I did a whole dedicated bee and honey themed reading vlog, and so I'm not going to dwell on the books that I read in that, but I did read 15 of those and DNF'd 2. So 18 books in total for that vlog. Some were fantastic, like The Beekeeper of Aleppo and The Honey Bus, a nonfiction memoir and a historical fiction about a Syrian refugee family. There were some fun new picture book finds that had to do with the topic, and then there were a lot of just good, average, some mediocre reads as well. So if that sounds fun, or you want to know more about the bee themed books I read, I would recommend checking that video out. But next, let me touch on 2 contemporary romances. First is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. So I keep saying I'm not a romance girly. I haven't read that many, but I'm starting to include them a lot more in my reading life, at least 1 or 2 a month, because they're just fun, fluffy reads. And I'm reading a lot of pregnancy and parenting nonfiction, so I like to just kind of have some fun reads in between. And so I picked this one up. This one I've seen circle around for those that read contemporary romance, and I wanted to give it a try, and I landed on 3 stars. Middle of the road, just like so many of the romance books that I read, because I don't love them. I don't hate them. There's been a few that have worked really well. Mainly the story follows a woman in her 40s who writes a script which turns into a movie, and then she ends up falling in love with the movie star on set, which just happens to be her home. She wrote this movie based on her real life marriage that fell apart between her and her ex, and there were some interesting family dynamics explored. Overall liked it, but it was just a little bit cheesy, too convenient. The conflict just felt very silly and random to me, and it all just tied up in a nice little bow. Again, didn't mind it, wasn't bad, was exactly what I was looking for, but it also just wasn't like, oh wow, that was so great. Love the characters, love the dynamics. I really didn't love the romance very much at all, but as far as a contemporary romance goes, it wasn't terrible. This next one I think I called a contemporary romance, but it's not. It's a historical romance, which I discovered last month. Found one I absolutely loved. This one, some of you guys recommended this author. I don't know if any of you guys recommended this specific book, but it really didn't work for me. And that was The Siren Sussex by Mimi Matthews. I DNF'd this one pretty early on. This one felt very similar to the Fiance one that I DNF'd last month. Just lusty, not enough historical context. These 2 characters that are like pining after each other even though they have no base relationship yet. They just like see each other and just cannot stop thinking about taking each other's clothes off, and I'm like, I don't know, I just need more relationship development before even a thought like that like enters in a character's mind, and this one just didn't have it. Next, for some nonfiction reading, I finally read Wild by Cheryl Strayed. This has been on my TBR for ages. This is such a well-known, well-beloved book. It was turned into a movie, and I landed on 3.5 stars. It was overall a really interesting story. I think well told. Very sad. I think some of you were like, this is not a happy like go read. Yeah, it's definitely not. It's quite intense. Cheryl talks about her experience on the Pacific Crest Trail from California to Oregon, but it's so much more than that. It's kind of her processing where she's at in her life. She experienced some intense tragedy with the loss of her mother, and she kind of went down a dark hole with drugs and not the best people, and so she's processing this transitional stage of her life, and by going on this very intense and difficult hike by herself. She talks about the people she encounters, the things that she's processing, and the stuff that she's learning about herself along the way. I thought it was well done, enjoyable. It didn't have that 5-star quality to me, although it was interesting to sit with someone who is processing and figuring stuff out. There also wasn't really like a conclusion. What did you figure out about yourself at the end of the day? Like, what did you learn besides maybe you're capable of doing a really hard and difficult thing? But besides that, like, what else did you learn? Did you learn from your mistakes? Are you gonna grow and change as a person? Like, I don't really know what happened after the trail. I mean, she has like a tiny epilogue about like, hey, I got married and have a kid, but besides that, I don't really know what else happened with her life. And so that's why it was 3.5. Very vulnerable. I appreciated that, and it was interesting. I'm glad I finally read this one. Another nonfiction that intrigued me and felt very right for spring was Funny Farm by Lori Zaleski, My Unexpected Life with 600 Rescue Animals. This one I heard about on Goodreads from a Goodreads Choice Awards either this last year or the year before that. And this one also landed between like 3 and 3.5 stars. A solid nonfiction, and so much more than just about this woman and rescue animals. She tells her childhood story, her upbringing, the very fraught and abusive relationship between her mom and dad, and the breaking down of that relationship and how that impacted her and her siblings, and then ultimately how her mom really saved the kids, took them away, and they grew up on this farm with a bunch of different animals, and it was interspersed with like random funny little animal stories. And overall, I liked it fine. Again, there wasn't anything magical or inspiring in a complete way for me that would elevate this to like a greater amazing book. I thought it was a solid, good story and also quite vulnerable in moments, but not too deep at the same time because it was juxtaposed with like silly animal tales. A parenting book that my husband and I finished listening to the audiobook of was Bringing Up Bebe, One American Mother Discovers the Wisdom of French Parenting by Pamela Druckerman. This one was a very interesting read. It led to lots of discussion and analyzing between my husband and I. We're still in the hypothetical stage, like we're talking about things that we can try to implement and do and stuff we'll process, but we won't really know until we actually have the kid. So this was really interesting to think about. Again, led to really good discussion. This book is all about Pamela Druckerman going into a deep dive research, anecdotal, and really what she is witnessing as she's living in Paris and raising her child, and how much the French parenting and French lifestyle differs from the American parenting style and how kids are raised in the US. And there are a lot of differences. There's definitely some gems in this book that I was like, yeah, that's so interesting. Let's try to implement that. And then there's some stuff in here that you're like, cringe. Wow, that's pretty intense. It's a little gnarly. It's a little shocking that that is how some people think about their bodies or themselves or expectations after a kid is born. It was a fun and interesting read. I landed on 4 stars. I would definitely recommend this to parents to be because, again, just leads to interesting conversation. The cookbook that we read for the month of May was Jerusalem by Yotam Ottolenghi and Sami Tamimi. This is all about Jerusalem and Israeli food, and it was really fun to cook from this. Some things were quite interesting, just different palette than I was used to, than actually quite a few of us were used to, but I really enjoyed experimenting with some new ingredients, new ways of cooking. I made a really delicious barley risotto. There were some tasty meatballs, some baklava, and there were definitely some fun finds in this book. Not one that I would purchase for myself and keep around just because I don't think that I would cook a lot of this stuff in here, or just like a lot of the meat choices or different ingredients again would just take kind of a big overhaul to try to implement into my daily cooking, but there were definitely a few recipes that were fun finds. And then I have 5 picture books that I picked up apart from the Beat vlog that I just pick up on a whim here and there. Usually when I'm at the library and I'm checking items in and I see a pretty picture book, I'm like, I should take this and read it at home. The first one I happened upon was Balcony by Melissa Castrillion. I love the size of this. I'm such a sucker for a picture book that just looks a little bit different from the other picture books. This is a completely wordless picture book, but it has beautiful illustration style in it. And the main takeaway is that this little girl plants a seed and grows a garden on a rooftop after she moves, and then makes friends that way with people. This was a fun one. I picked up Little Fox because I thought this cover was so cute. It's by Edward van de Vendel and Marjorie Tolman. This is a translated picture book. The art style is also very cute. Love the color palette. There is some unique processing of photographs with an overlay of an illustration that I thought was really interesting for a picture book. However, the story was really strange and hard to follow, and I don't know if it was a mix of translation or just a little bit too philosophical, whimsical. Yeah, the story was really weird. The illustrations were beautiful. Margaret's Unicorn, I believe this is about a little girl in like Scotland or England and how she discovers a unicorn and wants to raise it and then has to let it go as it grows up. And it's kind of like that story about like having a pet or an animal but then needing to release it into the wild and let it live its own life. I picked up Adventures with Barefoot Critters, an ABC book by Tegan White, and I really enjoyed this like poetic style in here of going through every letter of the alphabet and talking about the different seasons. This one was super fun and cute. Love the illustration style. Would totally see myself reading this with a child one day. The only thing that was really random was that this feels very fall-like, right? There is a deer and a raccoon and a mouse, and then it's not on the cover, but inside there is a Triceratops dinosaur also included, and I didn't really like pick up on that, but then I saw someone review this book on Goodreads and it was like super cute, love the book, but why in the world would they put in a dinosaur with these like forest woodland creatures? And I just thought that that was really funny. And finally, Henny Penny by Paul Gildone. Also liked the size of this. This is a classic, I believe written in the 70s, and we have a lot of chickens in our yard, so this one caught my eye. And I also really like this illustration style. It's kind of like pen, almost like scratchy, very vibrant colors, which I really enjoyed. But my goodness, was this so annoying to read. I read this out loud and I got tired halfway through. Like I could not keep going because it is so repetitive. And I know that a lot of the older classic picture books do have that style, like they repeat the same phrase over and over again, and then the next page they just add one line, but then you have to repeat the whole thing over and over again. I'm happy that we have moved away from that for the most part, and even though I do like poetry and rhyming and repetition, I know that's important in children's books. This one was just tedious to read. It was quite annoying, but I again loved the illustration style and color palette. It was really fun. So those are all of the May books. Again, the majority of my reading and stuff that I really broke down was in that bee themed video, so I encourage you to go check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about what I read and haven't watched that already. But overall, it was an okay month. Some fun finds, some duds. I'm still on the hunt for some beautiful 5-star amazing reads, and I really hope that I find some this summer. So stay tuned for a summer TBR video coming. I appreciate you guys for being here, watching, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!